So we have a really amazing panel today. Before we introduce the actually the fantastic guest with me today, let me just talk about me for 2 seconds. My name is Fabio Gori, corporate marketing on the Cisco side, of course, and I lead Cisco's multi-cloud marketing. So I'm in charge of course, articulating our message on top of our cloud and orchestration products, on top of the Cisco Google, Cisco AWS, Cisco anything. Kind of solution and partnerships. So it's a great pleasure to have 3 amazing guests with me today. And they're both customers and partners of ours. And of course, this is a big ecosystem. And you'll see how the power of the ecosystem really, really matters when it comes to cloud. Because you typically don't have all the answers. You need to get access to an entire ecosystem. So without further saying, let me start with actually the end customer over here, Fraser.
Hi, thanks. So I'm Fraser Scallon, and I'm the head of applied architecture and engineering for AXXL. AXXL is a new entity that's recently been formed since the AXA Group purchased the XL Catlin organization, the insurance company, which was at the tail end of last year. So I look after the applied architecture and engineering team. So I lead the technology space and the adoption of technology within that group.
Thank you so much. Mike.
So Andy Fleck, Engage ESM, so I'm the head of cloud management. So we were originally a Clicker partner for implementation and resale before Cisco bought them, and we've been helping Fraser and XL Catlin in implementation of multi and hybrid cloud.
I'm Thomas Scherer, I'm working as chief architect for Telindus Luxembourg, and we are an integrator, a cloud and a telco operator, and we serve mostly the regulated market there, notably the financial sector.
Fantastic. Thank you, Thomas. Very, very relevant discussion, especially in a European environment. And you may guess from my accent, I'm Italian. We know that Europe is different from the US. The regulatory environment and some of the constraints need to be worked out, so that's surely going to be part of the discussion. So without further saying, some of you may expect that we're going to start with a whole bunch of technologies. That's not going to be the case. In fact, what we discussed when we prepared the session is that very often it's not about the technology, it's about the business that drives the adoption of cloud. So I'm going to start from you, Fraser, in terms of what business priorities drove you to adopt cloud, and what is the business expectations in terms of the outcomes of your job and what you do?
Okay, sure. So our journey started a little while ago, basically after the XL and Catlin merger, where we had a very diverse infrastructure space and we needed to consolidate and standardize and harmonize the environment. Just because we had various different technologies, different standards with the merged organization. So we embarked on that journey to implement a private cloud. So that was obviously our first instance, was to try and standardize the environment. But soon after that was the sort of demand for leveraging PaaS services from the cloud, okay? Which is where we embarked on our journey into Azure as our first instance. And that was driven by a big data requirement. And so we're using that as our very first example to try and mature our services in implementing a multi-cloud and particularly a public cloud strategy on that side. So those are the business requirements. If you take one from very much an IT-based driver, and the other was leveraging new services that you couldn't really build internally. And so the intention was to go and buy those PaaS services from providers that are out there, really to be leaders in the market and to try and take that innovation and adopt it far quicker than we could ever build it internally.
Absolutely. Actually, I want to stay with you for a second. You said that we couldn't build internally. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, when I say couldn't build, there's you can always build it, okay? But I mean, the main thing was that sometimes it's a lot quicker to adopt something that's already built or available in the public cloud, and so that's what we wanted to do. We don't want to be we're an insurance business. We didn't want to be in the business of building IT and technology offerings and services. So if we could purchase it and just consume it, then that would obviously be our intention.
So there was also a request of speed in terms of your business leaders, right?
It's that time to market. For us to try and build it, we need to build the skills firstly internally, employ those people and so on. But the intention was to try and leverage those services from the public service providers,
Right.
especially when you're looking at big data with analytics and those advanced technologies. It's really the idea was to go and leverage those kind of innovations and capabilities that are already available, and for us to just basically exploit and use.
Yeah. And so, Andy, you've been working, of course, with Fraser, but also with many other Frasers, right? Because you guys are a fairly sizable system integrator and player out there. What do you see in general, on top of what Fraser already told us about?
So we tend to see customers that want to take that public cloud consumption, but actually want to start with a private cloud, but have that private cloud with the ability to be able to adopt the public cloud usage when the time is right. We also see a lot of demands to actually manage those services from an ITSM perspective, and the whole way that that's done between traditional data center and public and private cloud is very different. So that's where we have a sweet spot in an understanding of how we can help a customer transform from mode 1 to mode 2, but to keep that governance and service operations running.
So you're seeing demand not just to modernize the internal infrastructure, but also to kind of participate into handling the life cycle management of the infrastructure itself. That's what you're talking about. That's a pretty big deal. Thomas, so you are a multifaceted kind of player, right? You are a system integrator, a provider, etc. I think you can probably speak about yourself in terms of both an end customer, right? You as a provider, and also what you're seeing from your customer.
I start with the second question, and then because it resonates well with what you have said, Fraser, which is that our customers, they think security first. It's very important for them. They need to run an infrastructure which provides trust to their customers, because that is the financial industry, and there is hardly another industry like that where we have to trust that much. So they cannot sacrifice this. But now this industry is opening up towards the public cloud. The regulators are opening it. And what I'm getting a lot is like, okay, now we need to build a cloud strategy. Telindos, come over, we discuss it. Let's move all our VMs into the cloud. Let's see if that's going to reduce the cost and so on. And for me, that's the wrong approach. It's not just using the cloud because it's there. You need to know what kind of pieces you need out of the cloud, and of which cloud, by the way. So I think it's really something that has to go top down, where you have to think about what can be done better, where can I get rid of tasks which are not tied to my business, like tech-oriented tasks. As you mentioned, for an insurer, it's not really valuable, just consuming it, but need to know also what is that kind of service that you want to use there. I think that's an important thing to go to start this cloud journey from, rather than saying, okay, we have a VMware, say a VMware infrastructure, and then let's have it migrated into the cloud. There's, in my opinion, almost no cost advantage doing so. Which brings me to, we are also a customer of Cisco. We are running what we are calling a private managed cloud. We have a data center, we have the virtualization infrastructure there, which we call UFlex, that's the product name, and it's based on the FlexPod reference architecture, if you know that, which is based on Cisco UCS with NetApp storage, and VMware for the virtualization, and we have ACI on the networking layer. That we use a lot for doing outsourcing the workload of the customer. So we take their day-to-day activities, we run it in our infrastructure, and on their behalf, because it's financial industry, they are not interested in doing the IT too much. They want to give that to us. But now we combine this solution also with the public cloud. And that's by definition hybrid, because you have an existing infrastructure. May it be on-premise, may it be our hosting offering, but it has to be, we have to bring the value of the cloud into this kind of infrastructure in a combined mode.
So your need is really to kind of take the best DNA of the public cloud, right, injecting it on-prem to make it look like more of an automated
I would say
kind of
what is best
infrastructure?
to the customer, you know, and for one customer it's this, for the one customer it's that.
It's different, yeah.
And so there is not like, okay, we're gonna take this and that's the standard. No,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
at all.
Does that, by the way, I'll stay with you for a second and I'm asking you a quick answer on this one. Is that because every customer is different because their application set is different, their roadmaps are different, their look-alike are different? I mean, is that really where the dependency come from and all the legacy layers that they accumulated in the years?
Yes, a little bit. It's different from customer to customer. Some are already quite advanced. They run, for example, an Hadoop cluster, and then they are tired of managing an Hadoop cluster, and then they want to take that as a managed service.
Right.
And then there are, of course, customers which are very run legacy IT, like others would say that's 10, 15 years ago, and it's already a nice project to containerize it and make it by that portable to the cloud.
So there's no like a cookbook for customers, like I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm into the cloud.
For me, not.
Doesn't
At
work
least,
like that.
in my opinion, the value that we bring to our customers is, in my opinion, important value by getting a certain path through that jungle. There are tons of solutions. There are tons of cloud providers.
Yeah.
Maybe one wants to use big data from Google and, I don't know, Office 365 from Microsoft.
Yeah.
And in the same organization.
Yeah. So let me go back. Thank you so much. Let me go back to Andy and Fraser. And of course, you guys have a fantastic case study, right? I mean, part of the announcement today at Cisco Live was, of course, news about ACI Anywhere, HX Anywhere, and then you may have heard the launch of Cloud Center Suite. Now, Cloud Center Suite is going to be available starting next month, literally February. But of course, you guys at Excel have adopted the previous version of Cloud Center, which actually Andy here and the team put in production. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience between the end customer, the partner, and how do you kind of get to the end game, the end result, to run a successful project? I mean, what is required to have this success?
Be nice.
Do you want to start?
Yeah.
And also tell us about the project itself. Why did you end up selecting, of course, Cloud Center?
Yeah.
What was the need of
Okay,
running?
let me give you a brief sort of summary of where we were. So I joined the organization at the down select to the last two providers, and it was a Cisco HDS, run to the final, and we chose the Cisco offering, as you say, with ACI. It complemented our network strategy, and then NetApp, we had a significant sort of footprint of NetApp and UCS. So we chose that, and with Cloud Center as that multi-cloud portal was the intention. And those were, the normal factors came into it. As I say, this was all about trying to harmonize our legacy estate and really create an environment where we could migrate that legacy environment and standardize on. So that's why we did it, and we selected the product and the portfolio of products that make that up. And then we needed to get partners that were going to help us take us on that journey. So the key for that, or the key challenges, is one is you're buying technology, but really you have to transform the way you are implementing, managing, servicing, because as Andy touched on earlier, it had to integrate into our wider ecosystem. So if you take our CMDB, our ServiceNow instance, and for incident management, problem management, all of those kind of activities, it needed to integrate into that solution, and that's why we needed a partner to really join us and take us on that journey. Someone that's done it before, someone that's had that experience, and someone that can really help us with that thought leadership. The gotchas, the things that make it difficult when you adopt, which service integrators see on a regular basis. We don't see. We would only see it in our world once, if you take that into consideration. And so that's why we needed a partner that was going to help us navigate that journey.
And I think for us, part of the challenge wasn't technical. It wasn't integration into assets. It was about adoption and how you define a platform roadmap, how you understand the stakeholders, what's important to those stakeholders, and to regularly communicate with those stakeholders through deployment, because it changes fundamentally the way that people consume IT. So you might have a silo or someone within a silo that actually doesn't want to change, but if you haven't got that roadmap and the stakeholder kind of management, then that can cause you a problem, because there's a greater good to have from an organizational perspective. So I think that's probably the key thing for us is managing that process together with Excel.
Got it. So you guys have kind of unveiled the elephant in the room to some extent, which is it's not just technology, right? There's an enormous kind of need to change the culture of the teams as they move to cloud adoption. So I think everybody, myself included in this room, have heard terms like DevOps and SecOps and Net DevOps or SecOps and whatever. So can we try to demystify what do we really mean with these things? I mean, are these terms like a catch-all sort of terminology, or what are really the problems that need to be solved when it comes to moving from traditional governance to cloud governance, either cloud native or hybrid environments? What's required to get there? What really does it take, apart from the technology ingredient, to make it happen? I'm starting with you, Thomas.
Yeah. Well, I start with that DevOps term, and of course it's coming a little bit from that serverless architecture that you find in the cloud, so you don't need to manage a VM anymore. It's just something that you are there. So the promise is you have that developer who does a release and his life cycle management on top of the cloud. And so he's providing the solution and he is also running that solution. My experience, however, in real life is a little bit different, especially with our very security-oriented customers who have people who are very security-oriented on the infrastructure layer. They want to make sure that that everything is fine, that everything is running stable, and you have more the creative developers. And for me, there are two different DNA of people. And I think it is also healthy for an organization to have such kind of segregation of duties, because maybe the developer is chased by the organization. We need to have a new release, A, B, Z, and it has to come fast, and he wants to go into weekend and clicks release, and then it's maybe the wrong thing that he has released. So I think there is a certain kind of organizational split to be made. So I'm questioning a little bit that DevOps approach.
So maybe, Fraser, you're also absolutely well positioned as the end customer. How are you attacking this problem? What does this mean to you?
So if I take it back, I mean, some of the challenges is that, we've got to think of the two different worlds. There's the application development world, and then there's the infrastructure world. And the infrastructure generally, and I'll speak for our organization, was very much silo-based. If you were in the storage team, you looked after the storage. If you looked after the network, you looked after the network. And I think our experience is not probably dissimilar to a lot of others that are out there. And so what we needed to do was break down those silos to a certain extent from an infrastructure perspective. And then what's really important is when you get into the cloud is trying to converge your SDLC, your software development lifecycle, where infrastructure components and application components are being released, creating the same or similar backlogs, releasing them at the same time. And these are challenges because, the two worlds generally didn't meet in the previous world, okay? And so that's one of the challenges, cultural challenges that we're going through. And then my responsibility is very much around infrastructure, okay, not application. But from an infrastructure side, one of the key differences is it's infrastructure as code, as Thomas has mentioned. It's a slightly different practice to what the guys are used to with regards to infrastructure. Okay, so now they need to make sure that they're developing code, they're developing scripts, they're releasing scripts, they're getting the segregation of duties and the rules that we need to adhere to. There's another pair of eyes that are reviewing that code and releasing that code. And just because it's easy, you still have to follow the same, compliance rules. And these are some of the things that need to be embedded into, and we found are needing to be embedded into our culture, and basically the DNA of how we work.
So when you think about your own journey to become better, where do you think you are? You just started, you are in the middle of the chasm, so to speak, and trying to cross it. Where do you stand, and what's the next big thing that you've got to do or crack to get there?
So I'd probably say the next big thing is unification. So what we've got is people running at different paces in different areas. So if you take, I mentioned the big data team, where they're doing, deployments into the public cloud. They're a lot more advanced than the guys that are probably sitting in the traditional IT or the traditional infrastructure spaces. And so when I say unification, we need to try and get the same level of skill, mentality, and capability across the board, and really embed that as a culture, as the organization. If you were to put me on the spot and say, where are we as a blended rate? I mean, if the scale was 1 to 5, I'd say we're probably in the 2 at the moment on our journey into adopting a full-on automated and sort of DevOps
Thank
culture.
you for that. Yeah. So, Andy, of course, you see Fraser and other Frasers out there, right? Your customers, where do you think they are in terms of 1 to 5? I mean, it's kind of inspiring me with this ideal scale. Where do you see the market standing, like as a big average?
So I guess probably a 2 is probably a good guess, but I guess what we've found is problems in the way that people have consumed. So you start off with IT not being able to deliver in an agile way. You know, it takes 6 weeks to provision a VM, and this is not an AXA thing, this is a general thing. So you find that the developers then go straight to the public cloud and they start to consume those services really quickly and they get the value from it. And then finally IT comes in with an implementation of the private cloud, and then what you get is a kind of 2-speed thing going on. And in order for the organization to get the full value from the hybrid cloud, you need to kind of bring both of those 2 worlds together. And that's something which is a real challenge for people, because you have the developers again enjoying the direct private public cloud access, but you have the main data center people wanting to have governance and all of those good things they get from their normal mode. And it's bringing those together which is the trick.
Yeah. Which is also a big governance problem, isn't it? Maybe I'm coming to you, Fraser, one more is, when you think about governance, in the old world, we knew exactly how to do it, right? There are lots of tools and processes, ITIL and all those kind of things. When you go to the cloud, I'm hearing people and customers coming to San Jose, and I'm having this meeting in EBC, is, how am I going to do governance in the cloud? Like, people are just changing configurations and nobody's able to track any kind of change. Who did it? Why it was done? So, what kind of technology challenges and what tools do you need? Because the shocking thing, and I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but we have all this immense power of 2019 in the cloud, and I'm hearing people uploading pieces of software using scripts, which is 1970 batch kind of technology. So are we at a point where we need to invest into instrumenting these things? Because otherwise it gets unmanageable. What are the key technology enablers of this?
Yeah, I don't even know where to start on that one, because basically you've got to look at your entire portfolio of everything you do that basically governs your compliance. Whether it be monitoring to alerting to your security components to everything. Everything needs to really be reviewed, because I'll make it up, but I mean, if the process is deploying a server with an agent on it and that's how it registers with your CMDB as a very basic example, how does that work in the public cloud when things are being spun up and shut down very quickly? You need to keep track of them. You need to know what's happening. So one of the things that we've been having to look at is born in the cloud products to try and change that. And then what happens is, as Thomas was getting to a little bit earlier, is that you start having this hybrid world where you've got a mode where you're running on-premise with a certain set of tools and you're having to use different tools in the public cloud. And this is where our challenges are, because it's not a bottomless pit for money. And you've got to try and get the best investment as you can to try and make meet the rules, if you want to call it, that we need to adhere to. And these are honest challenges that we're in the thick of.
I don't want to turn it into an advertisement, but is that the reason why you pick Cisco Cloud Center, right? Because it helps you with this kind of holistic approach on the new and the old at the same time.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons for that is the backbone of our CMDB and ITIL processor is ServiceNow, and Cloud Center integrates very well with into ServiceNow. So that's absolutely it.
So with that, there's something fairly specific which helps that. So the integration with Cloud Center with ServiceNow isn't just when you kick off a workload from ServiceNow. The integration works even if you're using DevOps infrastructure as code. So even in that public cloud usage scenario, then you're going to get a CMDB populated within ServiceNow. You're going to get the governance. You're going to get the costing. So that's the main thing that allows us to bring those 2 worlds together.
That's a great insight. That's really a great insight. So Thomas, you guys are also a telco provider, right? So I'm going to give you the $1 million question for a Cisco audience, which is, what happens to the infrastructure when you adopt cloud services? Because what we heard from our very own Dave Geckler and the other speakers, as you adopt cloud, some of the traditional ways of architecting cloud, everything goes funnel into the data center, and everything is there, and you need to trombone all this traffic back and forth. What happens to the infrastructure when you adopt cloud in a mass scale? And what do you have to be careful about?
when it's about the private infrastructure, it's just about virtualization at different layer. But you need to manage it end to end. You have to do all the things as you used to do, monitoring your hardware, monitoring all the virtual machines or even appliances that are around, monitoring the services, the application that you have on top. Having eventually somewhere a multi-tenancy. Even if you are not a service provider like us, you need to build up a multi-tenancy because you have different teams that are working at different pace, taking different solution, and then you are doing the same thing on the multi-tenancy again. And I think that's something new. You have sometimes monitoring on several layers on the stack, more than you had before, which is then a big integration problem. And that even becomes harder when you go into the cloud, where you then have also, if it's just lift and shift, okay, you have a VM with an agent that you monitor with your monitoring solution, but then you have also then, how can I now monitor a managed SQL? How does that integrate into these kind of infrastructure? So that's, for me, a little bit the difference there. So the infrastructure itself becomes way more complex.
Got it. And Andy, when you go, I mean, Thomas took it on the data center side of the house, if you want. When you go actually to remote location, branches, etc., you have like massive amount of SaaS. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of the challenges that then happen? You know, we're hearing the rise of SD-WAN, for instance, as a big requirement. And of course, you know, I'm going to come to you as well, Fraser, in a moment. What are you seeing there in terms of this kind of impact that the adoption of SaaS is creating?
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole ability to be able to consume incredibly quickly and to be able to take the best of breed SaaS from the best of breed vendors. And that's really why you need something like a multi-cloud, you know, governance and orchestration tool to be able to handle that in one control plane and get a total visibility of governance and cost, really.
Got it. And for you, Fraser, I mean, what are you seeing? I mean, of course, you're adopting and changing all the application layer, like with cloud. What happens to your underlying infrastructure?
Well, I mean, remember, the two have to meet. Okay, if you take identity as an example, you know, even if you have a SaaS offering, you have to be able to get to it from your on-premise identities. Okay, and so where those worlds are meeting is that it's not one or the other. It's literally a blend of both. And as Andy and Thomas have both alluded to, is that you need to be able to control, manage, and understand what's out there, because you know, all of those processes of changing a component and understanding what the upstream and downstream dependencies and, you know, what's going to happen, all of that still needs to be managed. And basically, we've taken it from our data center and expanded it. And as you consume more SaaS services, it's even more that you have to test, you know, for every change. So it's, the complexities are increasing, but the business value is noticeable because it's the ability to consume new services in a far quicker way.
So how do you go about things like cost management in this area, right? Because in the old world, we knew exactly how much it was going to cost, right? We knew our OPEX, amount of people, and we knew how many servers and switches we'll buy, that's it. But now you're going to a consumption-based economics where not everything is so clearly, forecastable, so to speak. So how do you go about that? How do you build guardrails for your budget?
So I don't have the answer to that because it's a journey we're embarking on. But there are some challenges, as you say. There's, you're going from a CapEx model to an OpEx model. That changes the way you have to do your financing internally and things like that. So, if you take your software licensing, there's, no longer is it just auditing your estate on an annual basis or whatever it may be. It's constant. So all your processes that collect that information and support you to provide that granular financial reporting need to have been improved significantly while you consume these services. And that's just another one of those things that, when people embark on the cloud, it's not in the forefront of their mind. It's normally about leveraging the technology. It's one of those things that follows very quickly after when you get the first bill.
Yeah. So Thomas, let me come to you because you guys are specialized in addressing customers with extremely stringent, security and compliancy rules, right? Like the financial markets in Luxembourg and the likes. What did you learn from your experience?
One thing is actually, the cost is also something very critical that you have to govern. And for me, it is, speaking ITIL, it's for me an incident. that you deviate from the cost, and it has to be integrated into that kind of thing. We have to alert customers if they are overspending, and we need to investigate why this is happening. Is it on a good purpose or not? Just to add on that. So, and that is bringing me to your question. It is for our industry. So they have that list of controls that they have to ensure and guarantee, and that's going to be audited, that they have to fulfill to move into the cloud. And one thing is cost control. They have to have also cost control for leaving again the cloud, because usually going in is cost effective. Going out can be very expensive.
I mean, I heard Jacques in the cloud presentation a moment ago talking about the exit strategy, which actually, I didn't even hear before, to be honest. So what is this requirement of exit strategy that Jacques was talking about? What's going on?
We don't, or our customers, but also Telindus, doesn't want to get married to any cloud provider. We want to have flexibility, maybe also for cost control. You want to have that negotiations on the prices, but you also don't know if they change terms and conditions. That's also something regulatively very important.
This is mandated by regulation. It's not that a customer is fixated about an exit strategy like, hey, I'm going to Hotel California, you can check in any time of day, but you can never leave. It's actually a requirement.
Yeah. So we have to prove for our customers that go into the cloud that we can get them also out of the cloud again. That we need to show them how would we do that, and that's where a Cloud Center comes actually into the play. I remember we started looking into Cloud Center many years ago. It was still called Clicker, and we were searching for a cloud broker.
You both guys were really pioneers with Clicker on both sides.
And we never met. No. Then the regulator one day said, okay, now go into the cloud, but you have to do A, B, and Z, and D, and quite a list. I liked it because I felt like that's exactly the list I would like to have if I would run an organization. And for any organization, it's not good to be married or dependent on your core business to other things, even if they are not instrumental for your business. Finance is about having bank accounts and so on, and not about running something into the cloud.
Yeah.
So you want to get out of the cloud anymore. And Cloud Center was like the answer to that list that the regulator brought and said, if you go into the cloud, make sure that whatever you use in the cloud, that you can replace it by something else. Yeah. And much of these controls could already be answered back then by Cloud Center, and that was really, really good.
Very good. So Fraser, coming back to you, exit strategy and cost is one dimension. I seem to understand from what we discussed together, the reason why ultimately an organization like yours goes to multi-cloud is because you want to harness innovation, right? And so you don't want to be bound to any particular environment, not just because, hey, I want to move a workload because it costs 5 cents per hour less, but because some services are just peculiar of any given cloud. Is that one of the North Star that's inspiring your strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the intention is, today we are very much in one cloud, but, there's every possibility, and we fully expect that in the future that the business will be demanding us to move into a multi-cloud, multi-public cloud offering, depending on, because these, the cloud guys are offering all sorts of innovations that we potentially want to use and exploit. But one of the tricky things is the stickiness of that. When you use one of the specific services that one of these providers will offer you, it's not that easy to move it to another if you are dependent on it. But those are the considerations that we need to take into mind when we do it. But yeah, so I don't know if that's answered your question, but that's the intention.
Go ahead.
May add something to that. That brings us also back to all that DevOps discussion, because I'm also from the education, more a software developer, so I feel totally fine in the cloud. It's like the iPhone for the software developer. They can go in and use, and then they are locked in. And the IT infrastructure guy have exactly the opposite picture and have to make sure that this doesn't happen on a cost base, on whatsoever. Yeah. And that's the tricky part in going into cloud. It's not about using cloud. That's easy. That's even, it feels compelling, but making sure that you are not later on in a difficult situation is the hard one.
It is, yeah, you're right.
And is that the same thing that you guys are seeing? I mean, the reason to embrace this multi-cloud world is because it's not about arbitrage of workloads in different clouds, but because these services are compelling and they sit in different places.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think from a cost perspective, technologies are now moving on to allow you to optimize that cost, whether it's in VMware or whether it's in public cloud. So you're now seeing that kind of functionality, which is beginning to be seen in version 5 of Cloud Center. It's around in C1, and I think people are beginning to understand that you need to right size stuff not only when it's kicked off to make sure it's the right size and scale, but to do that on a continual basis.
Right, and I guess that means people need to understand that they need to invest in instrumenting this kind of environments. Like if you don't have, I don't want to say cloud center because it looks like too Cisco oriented, but you got to have a tool that tells you how much you're going to spend, for instance. Or you want to get out of one environment, go to another one, or just basically in one single environment, right sizing the workload. That's something very, very key to have. What other dimensions really you want to have across multiple clouds? I mean, we know networking as well. People want to have the same means. Security. What else is relevant for you guys? Especially for Fraser, but also guys, your experience. What is there really has to go in common between multiple clouds that you think shouldn't be provisioned by or provided by single providers? Like I'm hearing, for instance, application performance management is one of those things. Any experience in that area, guys?
Yeah, so we do quite a lot with not with Fraser's choice of vendor, but we do a lot with AppDynamics. So that gives the ability to be able to track the application and the business flow through the application. But where it really comes into its own is that next stage. So when you're taking a feed from the application to understand its performance and health, and then feeding that into a C1 or a similar tool to actually understand that and react on it, whether to scale up, to scale down, to rewrite size, whether to move the workload to a different cloud. It's that end state which is the next stage that I think people are beginning to look at. So they've started with public, hopefully they've got public, they've moved through into private and hybrid together, and the rest of it is that next stage of automation.
Got it. So let's come to the last part, which is the most intriguing one, which is, so far, that's the present, right? And you guys kind of said we're stage 2 of the journey. Now, today we heard, today and yesterday, for instance, Hyperflex to the edge. And you do that because you're starting seeing applications going to the edge. And we're hearing things like service mesh and many other things. Who wants to start talking about what's coming? What do you see on the horizon that will kind of potentially shape the future? What kind of specific technology areas you're seeing that will really kind of become big and important for the next future? Who wants to start? Any of you guys?
These guys are pretty
Let's start.
I can start if you want.
Go for it.
Because then I can also pitch for you because you don't want to sell a Cisco product. But
That's a good one.
No, I think the infrastructure as a service part is pretty much clear. At least for us as a company, it's clear how we do infrastructure as a service with our hosting offering. It's clear how we do it in the cloud. It's clear how we orchestrate all together. But as I said already in the beginning, the real value sticks more in the platform as a service and the software as a service, where you just use something and you get rid of maintaining virtual machines, and as you said. But this is very fragmented, very proprietary across the vendors, of course, because that's where the value sticks, which makes it difficult to have it hybrid, to have portability guaranteed. So how to port a machine learning task from a Google Cloud into an AWS or vice versa. And there I'm counting on Cisco actually. And I saw the first thing coming up yesterday in a session, Kubeflow, which is an open source project you are running, which is a machine learning toolchain similar to the one actually of GCP in my opinion.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that this is the new services coming on top of CCP. For me, it would very well resonate with customer
You know what?
demand.
Let's test the fifth panelist, the public here. Who of you guys know about Kubeflow? Anybody? That's interesting. You wanna go ahead because something very this is gonna take us into the open source discussion, which is probably the last part of the conversation that I get to. You wanna explain what Kubeflow is?
Yeah, Kubeflow is it's a big data tool chain based on Kubernetes. So you have your TensorFlow, you have Apache Beam, Juniper notebooks. Are there question marks what that is? It's a data engineering tool chain, and
it's all open source.
it's all open source.
So it's like
and
open
it's running
source.
on CCP, for example, and every container platform at the end of the day. So you can do big data in a hybrid mode.
Right. So that's a big deal because, of course, a lot of this innovation will come from open source. So I'll come to that in a moment. But what specific big areas you guys see and monitor as really potentially shaping the future of cloud, hybrid cloud, and multi-cloud?
Go on, Andy.
Well, you could probably go even further, couldn't you? You could look at something like fog computing. So when you're looking just in front of you, that's interesting. But if you take it all the way to the end, and you're not talking about your own data center, you're talking about distributing all of that stuff wherever, and then how on earth do you handle and monitor and manage and govern all of those things? And that really is taking it to the nth degree. But I think you need to be visionary and looking forward into how that would actually enable a customer to be agile and successful and change the game completely.
Yeah, especially you're talking fog, so IoT applications that will require huge amount of crunching and at the very edge of the network to avoid uploading all this data up.
Yeah.
Fraser, what about you? I mean, what do you think will become a big deal?
So there's two different sides to that, and one is the world is changing, and the demands from a business perspective are going to ever increase. Okay, and there's lots of these kind of pop-ups and innovations that are starting up all over the place, and so what we need to do, and this is why I'm going back to basics here, which is what we've talked a lot about, is how do we manage that and continue to manage it in a compliant and secure way, while not holding the business back. Okay, because what we want to get to the point is where the business can leverage these kind of services when they see it and they need it and they find a demand, and we want to just be the enabler. Okay, so basically saying that they can do it in a secure and compliant way. And so I'm not looking too further ahead. There's a group of people in my organization that do that. I'm just catching it. But the idea is that what we want to do from an infrastructure perspective is not hold them back. That's my ambition in the near term.
Got it. I actually want to throw myself in the mix. I can't resist, giving the fabulous answer here, which is not the company position, but I do believe the rise of containerization and containers, it will dramatically change everything. I mean, if you think about the rise of this new application development concept, which is based on microservices, right? You see this atomification of the application, and potentially the distribution of this function in a lot of different places, right? It could be different clouds. I think we are on the verge of seeing applications exceptionally distributed into potentially multiple clouds, your data center, the edge, and in the middle, you still have the network and security, and so securing containers and providing the next gen application performance management for all these analytics and the likes will require capabilities that are very, very evolved compared to where we are right now. That's I think a very, very big deal. And the rise of things like service mesh, for instance, right? We've been talking about Istio and the job that we've done with Google and the open source community is doing. AWS have their own version of service mesh. That's a really big deal. So maybe my last question, because I'm looking at the timing here before I open, and I'd like to ask you guys kindly if you start preparing your top of mind question after this final round of answers here. And let me start from you, Fraser. I mean, open source is an enormous engine of innovation. How do you harness that? I mean, do you guys have people that monitor the innovation open source? Do you work with Andy and the team to figure out, for instance, rise of Kubernetes, where do you start from, right? Yeah. How are you looking at this problem of harnessing that innovation with the lens of the partner and the vendor, or you guys have your peculiar approach?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's with multiple vendors. Okay, we would have a core group of people that are on the lookout for these kind of new technologies and how we can expose them or exploit them. And then what we would look to do is really engage with vendors that like these guys that can support us on that journey and help us adopt it and guide us on that adoption. So we do that. We absolutely do that all the time, as I say. But I mean, we need to go back to the basics. We're fundamentally an insurance business. We're not an IT business, and so we would leverage the expertise as and when we need to.
Got it. So fundamentally, what you do is, because your answer is interesting, is you want to work with players that take advantage on your behalf of open source innovation, and then they productize it, right, and give it to you in a consumable fashion, rather than doing your old salad of open source tools and stuff that you download from the internet.
We try and do the guidance, and then we would look to have, and we have substantial vendors that would help us with the development and the adoption of technology, and we would look to them to guide us and adopt us. They also bring their innovation and their ideas to the table as well. So it's a mutual partnership. That's what the partnership's about. It's not just us asking for it. It's about people that are going to help us thought lead in this space.
Yeah. And the same question to you, of course, and then I'm going to come to you, Thomas.
So I think from our perspective, that's the reason, not open source, but that's the reason why we partnered with Clicker all those years ago, because we were looking for something new and disruptive to differentiate what we were delivering into the market. And so open source is another example of that. So the wider Atos have a great relationship around OpenShift and the Red Hat side. And I think that's only going to get larger, especially with IBM's buy into that particular technology. But absolutely.
So of course you're looking for curated open source kind of experience, right? That's where Red Hat come from, and actually as a company we're taking pretty much the same approach with Kubernetes and Istio and everything else.
But I think what the customer also needs is a support model that allows them to consume that in an easy way, and then maybe a vendor which is based on open source but has a single point of contact for a support model across the whole stack makes sense. Absolutely.
That you want to call a human more than making a post in a forum, right, and hoping that somebody will solve your problem. Thomas, let me close with you.
It resonates very well. I mean, I'm a big open source fan. Also, not only as a techie, but also as working in the regulated business. You have pretty much control over everything. You see the source code, you know what it is, but that means also you have a whole bunch of information that you need to manage. And especially if you're an insurer, for example, or we as a service provider, we cannot also take care of every little bit that is around. So we need companies like Cisco, for example, that take over this responsibility and provide us the support and take and build a turnkey out of open source. So we have that audibility, we have also that flexibility of open source, and we can still subscribe to an SLA.
So I swear this wasn't prepared, but I want to ask you: is that the reason why you adopted the Cisco Container Platform? Because it gives you that kind of curated Kubernetes experience by us.
That's exactly the thing. That's exactly what our customers are demanding for. They want to go into that container train, which is mostly open source, and like Kubernetes, but they need a turnkey. And also we need to have it in a way that we can manage it on behalf of our customer, and we are used to partner with Cisco. We know exactly how partnership with Cisco works, and to drive new revenues out of that and make our customers happy. And that involves then that you deliver the perfect solution that we are confident that our customers will not shout at us too loud.
No pressure.